being with those of like precious faith virtually. Better than nothing, certainly. I'd like to do three things today in the 30 minutes that I have. The first thing I want to do is I want to provide a little allegorical story to make my point at the beginning of this little presentation. Second thing I'd like to do is do a compressed version of the scriptures that apply to it, because the third thing is I have a lot of slides I'd like to present, because we're going to look at maps. We're going to look at maps. We're going to talk about the history of fleshly Israel. And as we all know, Abraham's descendants were said to be of two kinds, right? They were going to be as the stars of heaven and as the sand of the sea. And it's the sand of the sea that we're discussing today. And I wrote down a comment that Brother Gunnar made. He made this comment 3 or 4 times when he spoke, and this is what he said. Science and prophecy both prove the Bible. Remember that, Brother Gunnar? Yes. Okay, well, we're going to look at that, how that works. And I'm going to tell you my allegorical story first, and then we're going to share my screen, okay? And here's the story. You are in your kitchen and you are cutting up vegetables, and zucchini you have, and carrots and red pepper. You have all these different vegetables, and you put them in a blender and you blend them all up. And the last thing that you put in the blender is a pea, just one single pea. And you blend everything up, and then you pour it all out onto a cookie tray. So it's like a vegetable smoothie, right? But there's the pea. The pea somehow is not blended. No matter how many times you do that, that pea is always surviving somehow. That's the story that I'm going to lead off with. Now I'm going to share my screen. This is a story which begins in 2045 BC with this call of Abraham that we're all familiar with. Let me just let me go here where I can choose to share my screen. And I would like to go to my PowerPoint presentation here. And I want to know if everybody can see that screen. That's my main issue, is to share the screen. Of course, my screen is blocked by all these. There we go. Now,
is it possible to make the font a little bigger, brother?
I'm not going to do that because you're only going to look at this slide for a minute.
Oh.
If it's filling your screen, that's all you're going to get. I want to make a point about these maps that I'm going to show you coming up, these maps here. And this is the point. This is the Maps of Ancient History Wikipedia effort. It's a nonprofit bunch. And at the beginning of these maps that they provide, they list here 32 different sources from which they have derived the information that they used to make these maps. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this, because we are not looking at Bible maps when we're going to go into this, looking at these maps. These are not based on the Bible. Not one of these references includes the scriptures. And I just want that to be noted, because we don't want to be serving our own purposes if we say we're looking at historical maps. And I want to make a point about this first map that we're looking at. This is a map produced by these people who used all these references that you see here, are all scholarly references, people that are researchers and archaeologists and college professors and that write books about this stuff. And if you are looking at the world, 4000 BC, it looks pretty blank, doesn't it? And this little purple, I presume that you can see my cursor. This little purple thing over here is the Sumerian culture. Now, there are other sources of maps of ancient history, and they differ a little bit. But when you need data to make maps with, then this is the kind of map you always get when you're at 4000 BC. We recognize that the Bible tells us that God created man, which is a sudden thing. He did it very deliberately, and we peg that at 4128 BC. And this map shows one little area of purple at 4000 BC. The rest of the world is basically blank. They have a little color over here in South America, on the west coast of South America. I didn't look that up. I forgot what they were. But let's jump ahead to the beginning of our story in 2045 BC. This is the call of Abraham. I'm going to read you Genesis 12:1. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless thee, curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. And we recognize that that was restated again in Genesis, later on in Genesis 28:14 and elsewhere, and to Abram's progeny as well. He left. You see this map. I'm going to jump ahead a couple of times here. This is 2045 BC, but if we look ahead, I have expanded views of 2045 BC. Let me just show you that in North America, we have what's called archaic Amerindian hunter-gatherers, and then up north, you have Arctic marine mammal hunters. These are just generic terms designed to satisfy the map maker's knowledge that some people lived there, but there was no signs of civilization. Again, here in South America, the same language, archaic Amerindian hunter-gatherers. Couple of signs of life there on the west coast of the South American continent. Here's Africa again, hunter-gatherers. All right, this is all very vague, but this is 2045 in the Fertile Crescent. Here is where Abraham was found when he heard the call, and he went up this way like this, up above here in the bottom of what we refer to as the Fertile Crescent. He went through Haran. As we recall, he lost his father here in Haran, and he wound up down here in Canaan, where you see my cursor down here, at the southeast Mediterranean and at the top of the Red Sea here. And so this is a map that was made of 2045 BC. And that's the beginning of our story. You see Elam here. This is a biblical country. This is the third dynasty of And this down here is called the Thuban Kingdom. And here in the green, you see this is the Heracleopolitan Kingdom, which is a kind of a precursor to the Egyptian kings. We're going to jump ahead now 100 years to let me get past these wide views. This is 100 years later, 1945 BC. Now, in 1945 BC, we see this is the Middle Kingdom of Egypt being introduced. See, it's clinging to the Nile here, this brown stuff on the bottom. You see that? Then you also see, make a note, this is the city of Assur here at the top of this bluish area. That's going to become Assyria. All right. Now let's move ahead from 1945, 100 years to 1845 BC. Now you see Assyria developing here in the blue. This is Assyria. And you see an expanded Egypt. This is the Middle Kingdom of Egypt still, but it's become larger. You see up here in the Mediterranean, this red stuff, it's the Minoans. You've heard of the Minoans when you were in high school. When you were a high school kid, you learned about the Minoans. This is now, we move ahead to 1700 BC. I don't know if you can see that up there, but it says 1700 BC. And in 1700 BC, we have the kingdom of Cush, which is mentioned in the scriptures. A reminder that these maps were not relying, at least they are not said to have relied in any measure on information obtained from the Bible, but this is 1700 BC, the kingdom of Cush, Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Now this says, I don't know if you can read these because I don't know how, I can barely read it on my own screen. This is the Babylonian Empire of Hammurabi here, this purplish, light purplish color here. And then we have these kingdoms. I want to make a note about these maps that we're looking at too. And this is an important thing to note. When you think of today's world map, you see all these countries on it with names, with borders. That's very recent development, okay? Because for most of human history, we would describe these not as countries, but as cultures, languages, kingdoms, tribes, civilizations, not countries, and certainly not republics. A republic is ruled by people who have representative government. Maybe they elected them, or maybe they didn't elect them. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a democracy. It can be other forms of civilization. But kings ruled the earth right up until the end of the 18th century and into the beginning of the 19th century and even thereafter. So countries that are republics are a new thing on the earth. So this is Kush, Egypt, Babylon under Hammurabi, and some of these other countries that are beginning to appear. And I mentioned Katna, which is this purple and blue stuff is Katna, and Yamhad. And I didn't look up every one of these because all told, there are many hundreds of civilizations that have existed on the earth. This is now 1600 BC. We've moved another 100 years. Now, 15 years before this, in 1615 BC, was the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the law. And the division of the land here, you don't see anything labeled yet, but the division of the land comes in 1569 BC, which is, I think, 45 years after the Exodus. And this begins in 1119 BC. This begins the period of the judges right here, which lasts until 1119 BC. Now, you have the same Kushes down here where you can't see it. And this is the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. You have still Babylon under Hammurabi here. These two that I mentioned earlier, Katna and Yamhad. And let's go to the next slide, which is 1500 BC. This is the period of the judges that we're in now. So you add this Mycenae here in the green. The Minoans are still there. And who do we have here? We have Arzawa in this light green. I'm not sure if anybody can even see these things. We have Lucca, which again are kingdoms or civilizations, or it's not really known. They're certainly not countries with borders. Then we have Alasha, which is this small red in the extreme east of the Med. Then we have the Hittites in purple. This says Hittite kingdom. I know you probably can't read that. The Hittites were a mighty civilization. People don't, I skipped out of my slide here. The Hittites. Then let's see if I can tell who these people are here. Let's see. I'm supposed to have been back here on slide number 12. That's the number up in the left. That's the slide number. All right, so then we have the Hittites I mentioned. Then Nineveh, you see this. I don't know what's happening. I guess I got to be careful how I touch my touchpad here. Nineveh, and there's Assur. This is Kassite Babylonia. Let's jump ahead. This is a wider view of the world, and you can see that this is 1500 BC, and there's still not much going on in the rest of the world. And that doesn't mean that there's no one now that has moved off to these further reaches of the continents. But when you have to make maps, you need data, and this is what the data shows. So this is 1400 BC. This is still in the period of the judges. Now you have what's called the New Kingdom of Egypt. And you have a Terramare culture. I know you can't read that, up here in the north of Italy. They are a culture that apparently built houses on stilts, and I'm not sure why that was, but You have an expanded Hittite empire, this purple here. You have Kizuwatna. This is Kizuwatna. I know you can't read that. I can barely read it myself. Kizuwatna. And we have the light green Kizuwatna. Okay, so there's nothing new. Kassite Babylonia. So let's move ahead. This is 1300 BC. This is still the period of the judges. Now, at 1300 BC, we have Assyria, which has expanded, and the Hittites have expanded, and we have listed here, and I don't know who they think they're talking about here. This is unknown sea peoples. I'm not sure what that means, but sea peoples of unknown origin. And this bluish, purplish, turquoise thing here on the Mediterranean coast is a kingdom called Tarhuntassa. That gets related to the word Tarsus, from where the Apostle Paul came. So let's look at our next slide here. This is still the period of the judges. Now you see the Phrygians. Where are the Phrygians? Oh, I just lost my place there. The Phrygians are right here. Yes, they're the Phrygians, okay? And by the way, the Phrygians, which I did look up, gave us a valuable thing, the legend of King Midas. I don't know, I guess he was a real king, but obviously he couldn't turn things to gold. And then you have a new kingdom or people or culture or language showing up here, Urartu. And then you have Colchis up here on the extreme western end of the Black Sea. And then you have, let's move another 100 years. This is 1100 BC. Now, in 1100 BC, I'm sorry, 19 years before this, Israel enthroned their first king, Saul, 1119 BC. Now, we see here a new thing. The Greek city-states are developing in the Med over here. I think we're going to see this better in the next slide. Greek city-states, Lydia, the Thracians, an expanded Syrian empire. They're looking pretty strong here. Philippi, over here on the right, this little yellow spot here. And then you have Meshwesh and other Libyan tribes showing up down here and moving into the new kingdom of Egypt. Let's look at the next slide. This is the Southeast Mediterranean, which now includes, let me see if I blew this up in the next one. This is 1000 BC. We still have the Greek city-states, Thrace, Lydia, Phrygia, the Assyrians, Babylon. But now we see that they have installed our map makers at Ancient History Map Wikipedia effort. They have written in down here, the kingdom of David and Solomon. With the Philistines, you see the Philistines and the Phoenicians up here. Hamat above. And the Arameans here in Arabia. Chiefs of the West over here on the left. Now these Hermopolis, Heracles, and Heliopolis, which are to develop into Upper Egypt. This is maddening. This computer, if I touch it wrong, it wants to change slides on me. All right, so this is, we're going to zoom out here for a wider look at 1000 BC in Southwest Asia. And you can see the Greek city-states that we mentioned earlier. And there is the kingdom of Cush down here. Let's move ahead to another slide. This is still the period of the kings. And now you can see that the Phoenicians are colonizing much of the Mediterranean coast. One thing that I'm don't want to fail to mention is that through all these countries that are coming and going, these kingdoms, century after century, Israel's still with us. This is still a period of kings. They're headquartered in Jerusalem, and they're still underway and intact as a people. This is 900 BC. It says right up here on the top, if you can't see that. All right, so let's go to our next slide. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This is the 900 BC zoomed in view. There are the Phoenicians around the Med. And there's a Villanova culture in northern Italy, Golesica culture, Logan, Melanon culture, Este culture, the Greek city-states, Thracians. Let's move ahead to another slide. This is the southern hemisphere in that same year of 900 BC. This is partially obscured by my screen. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of annoying that thing hides my date up there. It's 900 BC from a wider view. And as you can see, you know, the world it's not empty, but it's kind of sparse outside of the Mediterranean. And let's look at another map. This is 800 BC, and this is still the period of the kings for the Israelites. So here, Urartu has grown, and the Medes appear over here. This is a thing that we're familiar with from our study of the scriptures, Medes. And then we have this Hallstatt culture in South Central Europe. This is 800 BC. Let's move ahead another 100 years to 700 BC. In 700 BC, Carthage appears. See Carthage over here on the left? You have the Greeks colonize now the Mediterranean and Black Sea coasts. And also down here on the right, you see Persia first appearing. Again, this is the period of kings for the Israelites, who are still okay at 700 BC, but you know what's going to happen next, right? This is the map at 600 BC. And in 606 BC, 6 years before this, Zedekiah is dethroned because Nebuchadnezzar here in Babylon took great offense with Zedekiah because he tried to team up with the Egyptians to stop the Babylonians from taxing them. And Nebuchadnezzar went down there and sacked Jerusalem. And that began their 70 years of captivity in Babylon. So on this map also, the Medes have expanded greatly. You see this? Because you know what's going to happen to Babylon next, right? The Medes and the Persians get together, right? And they defeat the Babylonians. So let's look at our next map. This is 500 BC. So look what happened. Babylon is gone. The Hallstatt culture is still in place. The Greek colonies are still existing. Carthage is still there, but Medo-Persia now has subsumed Babylon. And this is, I wish I could see the date. This is 500 BC. So 36 years previous to this, Cyrus gave permission to all those who were Israelites in captivity in Babylon to go back to Jerusalem should they desire. They didn't all go. I think about 40% of them went, as I seem to recall having read somewhere. My doddering old age, I can't remember anything anymore. So this is our next slide. This is also 500 BC, but it's a wide view. And as you can see, you know, our diligent people at the Ancient History Map Wikipedia effort are trying to be true to data. Not many people populating the world outside of the Mediterranean, even at this point. Just want to check my time here. Okay, I only have a couple of minutes left. Huh?
You have 5 minutes, brother.
Okay, I got 5 minutes. All right. You know what? We're going to zoom through these because I'm spending too much time talking about the maps. Of course, that's the whole point, right? I'm trying to show the brethren that science, we're looking at people that were careful trying to make maps based on facts that they are able to obtain. And these maps show us that the world changes the way those vegetables in the blender changes, a churn. The countries of the world, I'm just going to skip through these. The countries of the world are not even countries, civilizations, languages, nations, kingdoms, use whatever word you like. It changes. It's like I had to go to these other type of maps because the Wikipedia people ran out of steam there. There's still work underway. This is how far they got, 300 AD. So other maps also show a concentration of civilization in the area that it centers on the Tigris and Euphrates, basically, and around the Med. So this is 500 AD. And let's jump ahead to another. This is a close-up of the 500 AD map. And there are, Visigoths, and I think I made a list here, but I don't have time to read it. If I made a list to read all of the nations that are available to list, there would be hundreds, and we wouldn't waste our time doing that. But the point that we're making is, through all of this churn of civilizations, here's 1556 AD, largely still occupying the same portions of the earth, filling in on the continents here. This is 1700 AD. These maps are very recent compared to the ones we looked at earlier. And you can see what's happening. The earth is filling up very lately, shall we say. 1859 AD, now we're beginning to encounter the Zionist movement, and the Balfour Declaration is about to come. And when we get to this world today, we see, if I can blow this up, let me see if I can get it to, never did a PowerPoint and a Zoom meeting before. But right here, in that little brown spot there's our P right there, okay? And it is the only piece of vegetable that has survived this churn over 4,000 years. Everybody else has come and gone, but the Israelites, they never went anywhere yet because they have a job to do, right? They are going to be required to be the earthly phase of this operation that was promised to Abraham, that they would bless, his descendants would bless all the families of the earth. So here's another little allegory if I have 1 minute left, all right? This is you're walking through, I'm going to stop my screen sharing. Stop that. This is my last allegory, and then you'll be done with me. You're walking through a coliseum or a big auditorium someplace, okay? And when you're walking, it's noontime. You're in a big city, and guys are pulling up outside with trucks, and they bring in all this equipment. Then you walk through an hour later, and you see they're bringing all this stuff up on the stage. They got pipe staging and all kinds. Then you walk through an hour later, and they got lights up there, and they bring amplifiers and musical instruments, and you realize there's going to be a concert here tonight. Going to be a concert. I get it. So we're watching this develop here. That little country of Israel appeared in 1948 after all this time of preparation. And I'm not saying it's going to be a concert, because we know that the next couple of things we expect are second phase of Jacob's trouble, right? Which hasn't happened yet, followed by the things that are outlined in great detail in the 17th Epiphany volume by Brother Johnson, beginning with the revelation of the ancient worthies who will be recognizable. We don't know how, but they will be recognizable. So this, relates back to what Brother Gunnar said earlier, that science, those people that made those maps that we just looked at, did it based on scholastic work and archaeology, and my timer says my time is up. And they didn't use the Bible. But as Brother Gunnar says, I'm going to quote you to start, Brother Gunnar, and to end this thing. Science and prophecy both prove the Bible. So with that, I would say, may the Lord add his blessing.